One of the things I'm picking up, and I'm kind of building and this is a kind of a philosophical thing I'm working on, but I notice in these different meetings, when you say career pathways or pathways, people from different groups and different sectors of the education and workforce space are actually looking at those words through different lenses. And so here's kind of what I'm picking up. We say this name, career pathways, and when I say that, everybody has a lens of how you look at that. But I'm finding that depending on what you do every day, your lens is a little bit different. And it's been useful for me to start to appreciate those differences in the different kind of sectors of education and workforce so that we can, because they're all good and they're all working towards very valuable objectives, but they're a little bit different. So here's what I'm picking up on. In K-12, it is really, the discussions that I'm in are about transitioning on high school students and children into the right career path through college and through higher education. But that's the endorsements and really building this awareness early on. But that's the driving objective, is this alignment with K-12. When you get into the adult ed workforce space, where a career pathways really has probably the longest history, it is really about jobs and helping employers in our communities and really helping economic mobility for individuals in our communities. And that's been kind of the core function from the workforce lens and the adult education lenses, really helping folks attached to work, especially underprepared folks, those have been kind of left out of the traditional sectors of higher ed. And then in colleges, so much of the pathways work has really been about refining the business model and reducing and making lean kind of the processes for students towards objectives in getting more credentials and more degrees out of the service delivery mechanism. And work is out there, but work is not the driving thing that starts the discussion. A lot of the discussions and research has been on this, getting the business model tighter and aligning it to the K-12 and to the world of work. But that's where you see a lot of the work. Each of those lenses you look through is very valuable. But if you get in a room with different people and you're all saying career pathways, I've found people are kind of understanding it a little bit different, and it's kind of been enriching to start to appreciate these different lenses that people look at things through. So just take that with you and think about it. I'm still working on it, but that's kind of where I am right now. So a little bit about adult education in Texas. So we have some folks that may or may not be very familiar with what we do. So let me talk a little bit about it. The state program has transitioned into quite a bit of a bona fide workforce development social mobility program in the last 5 years. We transitioned the program in 2013 from the Texas Education Agency, and really at the Workforce Commission had this objective of building a robust cornerstone and kind of foundation really for our workforce in terms of preparing workers for the future, while still maintaining family literacy and other social aspects of the program, but really building out that career pathways piece. We have about $80 million a year that we have to do these services in the state. Most of it goes out through competitive grants. Who in here got a grant or a sub-grant through one of us? Raise your hand. Many people in here got a lot of our money. And in fact, I'm always proud because of this area. I love to brag. And when I'm with my peers in other states, I always remind them that my Houston grant here at the HCAC is bigger than the grants of 43 other states, just the Houston area. So that really humbles the conversation, you know. But yeah, some of those states have really small resources. And here in Texas, we're lucky we got a lot of money, but the bigger states do too. We have about 80,000 students a year, and they're multi-year grants and largely consortia like you have here in Houston, and most of them are consortia. And those consortia, I think, also differentiate us from many of the other states. We have kind of really fostered this model of do what you do best and partner with the people that do other things that your students need, but maybe that's not your best skill set. So we have good partnerships with community-based organizations, with our community colleges, with our public schools, also with our workforce development system and vocational rehab systems, and businesses. And so these consortia really provide that service to the student as a solution rather than just kind of an individual education service in general. Some other information, about where the money goes. We have about 18 grantees, the prime grantees for most of that money in colleges, some workforce boards like here in the HGAC area, Houston area. ISDs have 5 of them, educational service centers, and nonprofits 2 and 7 apiece. But a good data point in that, and remember I said largely consortia, is that within that group, we have 44 community colleges out of the 50 in the state somehow involved, either a very light touch through providing some sort of service delivery, a training class or something, all the way to kind of bona fide members. So that is a great value because we're bringing what we have to offer in terms of other assets to the college systems. And Cynthia's going to talk a lot about the work they're doing on pathways, but we've really found a great marriage, I think, of the systems. And more, I see the colleges either getting involved or getting more involved and really building more robust ways for the systems to interact proactively and positively with each other. In terms of our customer, if you're new to adult ed, it's really just about anybody that's low basic skills, meaning below a college-ready level, with or without a high school diploma. So I still run across people sometimes people that should know better that say, well, we can't serve people with diplomas. And I'm like, well, you sure can if they're at an 8th grade level or a 7th grade level or 11th grade level. And that's actually a pretty large group of our population that are coming back. Maybe they're 30, 40 years old and they're wheeling back around. Part of the big mission we've been on is really reducing that footprint in developmental education, and our no-cost services do that. And so that's a lot of where we see the interaction with the colleges is really doing remediation at no or low cost through our grant program in a very seamless way for the students. So like I said, we kind of have 2 hats in that college world, the developmental ed world that we're engaging with, and then the workforce training world for our CTE programs. And we'll talk a little bit more about that right now, I think. So let's talk about our pathways. And that has been kind of like the one thing we've been super laser focused on in Texas. And beating my expectations, which I always have very high expectations and sometimes pipe dreams rolled in there. But in five years ago when I got hired to be the state director, I really wanted to get this pathways thing big. I had been doing it at Alamo colleges, loved it, knew this was the right way to change lives in terms of poverty and helping folks reach those social mobility goals. But I would never have anticipated that folks like yourselves would have stepped up and helped us accomplish some incredible mission goals around the area of pathways. And that's where we're getting so much excitement from our state as well as from the national folks. So let me talk a little bit about our pathways. We implement those through really 3 major mechanisms. Those primary grantees that we have in this room here are charged and required to do a variety of different career pathway programs, integrated programs, programs with English language learners, programs in corrections, programs that are working directly with employers, and programs for internationally trained professionals. All of those kind of fit into this pathways umbrella for us. But then we do these sub-grants, kind of discretionary grants, one of which is called Accelerate Texas, which was fostered and grown at the coordinating board, and we took it on a few years ago as a full-time thing. And those are grants that come out 1 or 2 times a year. We just awarded, I think, 11 of them, and we're about to award several more in the next week or 2. But that really is bringing new partners into the room. I see we got Lee College over here. Raise your hand over there. Lee's a new one for us. They're going to be doing Accelerate Texas in the prison system here in Texas. So it's going to be the first corrections-based Accelerate Texas project we've had, and we're real happy to have them on. And so we've been bringing in new partners as well as helping those that have our prime grants kind of grow and do bigger things. And then we do another series of grants called the Ability to Benefit grants. Who in here is familiar with the term Ability to Benefit? Just raise your hand. Okay, about half of you guys. Ability to Benefit, in short, is a federal program and the federal financial aid for Pell Grants that allows individuals that lack a high school diploma to receive a Pell Grant if they're enrolled in a career pathway program. And so that has been a big focus for me personally because it brings new money into our system through Pell Grants. And anybody that knows anything about Pell Grants, including probably yourselves, knows that that can be a big game changer in your life or in the student's life in terms of succeeding in higher ed and maintaining and growing and going on to get credit degrees. So I really see ability to benefit as kind of like a big tipping point for us in terms of growth. And that was one of the meetings I was at last week in DC, was a convening that the Assistant Secretary put together on ability to benefit. And Texas and just a handful of states are really jumping out there, like 5 states: Wisconsin, Indiana, Texas, Washington State, and there's somebody else in there that'll come to my mind, Mississippi. And you know, that seems to be where there's a lot of interest at the federal level, because there's been a lot of discussions around Pell in Congress. And it was really a good moment. I think the Assistant Secretary wanted to get us together to kind of make the case that this area of Pell is worth maintaining and worth growing to the congressional folks that attended this meeting that we were in. So ability to benefit's one of the big movers for us, and I'll show you some data on what you guys are doing in ability to benefit right now. But I'll say that's kind of one of my big objectives this year. And if you're at a college right now listening and you're not doing it, or don't know what it is or whatever, you can give me a call or Ann Savino, because we'll come out and help grow that, because it's a big game changer for students to be able to get them into the Pell Grant world. Our workforce training program is called the Integrated Education and Training Model, and it connects in a very integrated way, as the name implies, workforce training in high demand, in-demand occupations, basic education, reading, writing, math, ESL, that's contextualized for that training, and then what they call workforce preparation activities, or sometimes we call them marketable skills, which are really all the other things that we know lead to student success and employment success in helping folks kind of move on with their lives and do well in higher ed and in the work world. These programs are sometimes commonly known. You'll probably know the name iBest if you've been following this around. It's been around 13 years. And they've got great longitudinal data on iBest out there in Washington State. It's kind of ticked off and grown into all the other states, including here in Texas, where we do it under Accelerate Texas and in our IET model. But that really brings the faculty together to work together, and that's probably the most critical element of it, is the coordination and alignment of the services. We do plenty to confuse students. We don't need to confuse them anymore in the instruction world than we have to. And so that planning and coordination is absolutely instrumental in a successful program. But they have common learning objectives, the contextualization. Why am I learning this math? Well, because it applies to the job you want and to the training that you need to pass. And then it leads to credentials that have value in the labor market. So these can be a combination of educational credentials like level 1, 2 certs, CE credentials, but really also the industry recognized credentials that have lots of currency there with our employer communities. We put our money where our mouth is in terms of doing this work. I knew growing this program in terms of career pathways was going to take money, and our commissioners have been very generous in adding kind of what we call a premium on top of these models, so that when we do our cost allocation for the grantees here, we have a base cost, which is that $600 to $700 cost that every student, all 80,000, get applied to. And then on top of that, the enrollment targets for the integrated programs get this $1,800 cost on top of it. So that really helps us grow this, because we knew that we couldn't just tell you guys, hey, go do career pathways and go find the money somehow. That approach is not a winning approach. And so we found a way, and our commissioners really took a gamble. The one thing I would tell you that really drives the discussion on this, and this is the risk that the commissioners took. We have an enrollment target in Texas that our legislature holds us accountable to, and that's a target I have to meet every year to our legislature. And so the amount of money, think of it as a nice piece of pizza. It's a big pie, and it hasn't grown much. It grows a little bit occasionally. It hasn't shrunk, thank God. But when we do career pathways, we're adding a lot more money on a cost per, so the pie is staying the same. So that means our enrollment is going to be lower because it's just less money to spread around. So our commissioners went to the legislature and said, hey, we want to reduce our target, which reducing targets is like just never done. You know, it's always grow, right? Grow more with less, right? Well, they said, hey, we want to invest in quality, not quantity. And so we went down from the close to 100,000 down into the 80s to do these higher cost models. So that was a risk and a request our commissioners successfully made, and I'm real proud of them for doing that because it's allowed us to give you the money you need to really grow these things. But that's kind of the mechanics behind it. So if you ever see one of the commissioners at your college or something, thank them for their allocations because they really took a leap there, I think, to help us bring that money. In terms of that, look at what it's got us. Our strategic plan in 2015 established a goal of 20,000 students in career pathways by 2020. And in 2015, when our advisory committee came up with that goal, and some of y'all heard this story, we were in a hotel room at a conference meeting, and one of our members said, we need a number, Anson. You know, when you have a number, that gets people excited. And you know, we have the 60 by 30 text. That's a number you can get behind. And if you look at other states, they have these numbers. So we wanted a number. And of course, me being adventurous, but I guess a little conservative, was hoping the number in 2015 they were going to pick was like 5 or 6 or 7,000. And lo and behold, that advisory committee member said, how about 20,000 students by 2020? That's a good sounding name. And man, I took a big gulp and we went with 20,000 and I got it approved by our commissioners. But look at this. You guys have delivered that goal 2 years early at 23,000 students. That is astounding to me. But you can see, basically, it's a combination of these different career pathway models rolled up into a kind of a cumulative number up there. But man, that really, I think that it gave us a place to go and a place to measure. And I mean, we had all these strategies to, you know, have to go back to them if it was not going to look like we were going to meet that number in 2016 or 17. But man, it just started picking up. And when we did that higher cost model, that's when things just took off. So you guys did that work. And so you notice how it's flattened out last year? That's kind of purposeful. Because last year I said, you know, we're getting hot on this. It's great. But as we were looking at models, we were a little worried about the quality. So I said, let's calm down on the high growth and level out and spend some time on contextualization and quality and building that in. And I think that served us well. And that's kind of where we are right now. So I'm very proud of that. So if you're part of our system, awesome. If you're not fully engaged in the system, sitting where you are in your office at your institution, we need to talk. And that's what we want to do today is to have that conversation. So we've got things that we think are our value propositions that adult education brings to our colleges. And those would include finding ways to reduce the phases. We know that long sequence of remediation in colleges is just a spiral into abyss. Especially for lower level students. And those of you in colleges see those numbers and have seen them for a decade. And we want to be part of the solution in reducing those sequences and getting into more integration. Increasing the quality and the options that we have students, really trying to grow what students want, because many times, especially that lower skilled student, they do not know much about the world of work. They do not know much about what options are out there in their local communities in terms of good paying jobs. They talk to their uncles, their cousins, their neighbors, but they don't get a lot of information. So a lot of, I see our work as building options that have value and we know have value because we've done the legwork in-demand occupations and in things that we know are going to bring higher household incomes for those individuals. Reducing the debt, we got $80 million. Let's put it to work and do something real with it instead of putting it on the backs of students or on institutions that have to pay for those costs. And then really sitting there and making sure that we are focused every day on what the customer signed up for when they walked into our building and helping make kind of the maze of our systems that we love and endear and do so much work meeting about as clear and crisp and straight-lined as possible towards the student objectives. So that's kind of what I think are the things we are bringing to the table in terms of some of the high-value aspects of adult education and literacy. I want to talk a little bit about rigor and alignment because that's been a concern, I know, from our colleges. People say, well, adult education, isn't that kind of just like, I don't know, like, what do they do over there? You know, is it very quality? And Tamara alluded to early on, Tamara and I grew up about the same time in adult education. So we go back. We have a few of those folks that have just hung around, and I appreciate them. But it was a little less on the rigor side, for sure. Those criticisms, I think, are well earned. But we have done a great job in the last couple of years, and I want to talk about something new for us in our content standards, really the road map, the driving instructions of what we teach in our programs. And so when you wonder about quality, look at what we've done here in our content standards. In 2016, we aligned them, and some of the folks in this room actually worked, but we aligned our content standards in reading, writing, math, and ESL to the college and career readiness standards here in Texas, to the federal adult education standards, to the TESOL standards, and to the end of course exams in high schools, and did a great job of really aligning these things so that we knew what we were doing fit into these other taxonomies of educational outcomes. This year, I'm really excited because we went on a very innovative edge, I think. I've been talking about this at a national level, and no one is even close to doing stuff like this. But we took those standards that are really strong academically, and then we aligned them to what work requires in 4 demand-driving career paths in our state, so that we could make sure that folks in adult ed were teaching things that had application in the workplace and that we could make those alignments. Because a lot of times that math teacher is teaching the Pythagorean theorem or order of operations, and a student says, "Why do I have to learn this?" And the teacher says, "Because it's on the test." And that's not good enough sometimes. But if you can say, because you're going to need to have this for that job that you told me you were wanting to get and you want to get into that training program, then it becomes real for the student. So let me tell you what we did. We aligned these standards that were first aligned to these standards, these academic standards, and now we've aligned them into these 4 demand-driving clusters in the state: advanced manufacturing, construction and extraction, healthcare, sciences, and distribution and logistics. And so we looked at those and said, like, what does the work requirements in these jobs, how does it align to those academic standards? We got about 30 some odd employers together that worked with us for about a year to start making those connections. The employers were really enlightened in this process. And I realized why about 10 days into it, honestly. Our labor market is awesome right now. And so these employers are hiring anybody they can for jobs. Well, these folks they're hiring are often coming in underskilled. And so these businesses are becoming adult education facilities because they're having to make a profit and turn a project around or make sure people are doing things safely. And so these HR and training professionals in businesses know a lot about basic skills now because they are working with it every day to run their businesses. So they really did a great job of helping us make these alignments in these clusters. People ask us, why'd you pick these clusters? Well, let me tell you why. 3 driving reasons. 1, we wanted clusters that have a reach and a presence just about everywhere in Texas. So we didn't pick something like agriculture because that doesn't hit the big urban areas, right? These kind of have a presence everywhere you go in Texas. The other reason was they have a very good projected growth into the future. So we didn't want to invest in something that maybe 5 years is not going to be here, is going to be in Vietnam or in Mexico or something offshored. And then the most critical one was we had to pick industries that had nice, clear paths for underskilled individuals to go into higher skilled jobs. So we didn't pick IT, which has a lot of presence in Texas, but it doesn't have a lot of reach down into lower skilled. There's a few things, but really not a lot. So that's how we got there. So what does it look like, you might ask? And these are available and published now. So we're doing training around the state to get the word out on this, and some of y'all are taking part of that training, I know. But what we've done is take the basic education academic standard, here it's a multiplication, and then we have applied it to the ONET detailed job descriptions and into actual work duties in specific occupations. So that, because my goal was to say, I want a manual that Tara over there at Wharton College can take to a student and say, here's why we're teaching this. and talk in terms of the job, not just in terms of you got to know it for the test, but really talk about the job. So it helps in contextualization, because now Tara and her program folks can contextualize curriculum better because they got some bridges from academic to applied. But they can communicate these things, and teachers can learn more about what work requires, because a lot of times our teachers don't know that. They don't work in that world, but they're trying to develop workers for the industries out there, and sometimes the teachers themselves aren't that attuned to it because they're teachers. So it's a good bridging, and I have a lot of excitement about this. I presented this up in Kansas, and about right now, like the mouths were like this, you know, it was like really amazing to see. And now I think in Kansas, they're going to be doing the Texas Adult Ed standards, because I just sent them a bunch of copies of it, and they're very excited about it. So if Kansas starts looking like Texas, don't be too surprised. Very excited about that. But there's rigor, but there's application and relevance. And that's where this contextualization piece comes in. And we see this in the colleges with the co-requisite models. To what extent are those courses contextualized to be relevant? And definitely in our integrated models, that contextualization is absolutely critical to help the students learn. And that's something that's been very exciting for us, is kind of keeping that learning focus, but really getting into that doing focus to help the students really know how what they're learning is going to be applied in the workplace. But this is what I was really thrilled about. Students in these programs that have this applied model, this contextualized model, we have now enough research to show that they have a 14% better measurable skills gain than students that are in the standard enrollment programs. So that was thrilling to me, because when we were running that data, I was like, what if it comes out and students are getting less outcomes in terms of academics? Then I'm going to be in a ditch, and I'm going to have to look for a new job. So seeing that number, 14%, made me jump. But why is that? Because students are interested. They're learning content that they can apply. They're engaged. Rigor and relevance is there. So that really helped kind of quell also some people that say, well, if we're teaching all this training stuff and contextualizing, are they going to be able to pass the GED? Are they going to be able to be academically savvy? Or are you just turning them into low-skilled, job-trained persons, you know? But it's both. We're getting both out of it, and we're getting both at a greater magnitude. So that's fantastic and great news for us. So let's talk about how we get there and the discussions that you guys have. And anybody that knows me knows I'm all about getting the meeting going and getting somewhere in the meeting. And I'll go out and have been to many of y'all's institutions to talk to your leadership about brokering these negotiations. But you know, it goes different ways. When you have colleges and workforce folks and adult ed folks get together, they've got different things in their minds sometimes when they go to those meetings to say, hey, we want you to go do a career pathway program with us. And these negotiations sometimes I think are critical in how we set them up and understanding where our customer in that meeting is coming from in their perspectives. So, you know, sometimes these meetings don't go too well, and people come in and there's all these entrenched ideas, and who in there has been in a meeting like that at their institution? Oh, y'all are being good. Y'all are being good. Tamara's telling the truth. Okay, there we go. Yes, you've been in these meetings because you're really busting academic norms and institutions that go back into the 60s and 70s. We are deconstructing these kind of bureaucracies and the embedded kind of assumptions about students sometimes as we go into those meetings, and that's a hard thing to do. But you really have to do it, but there's skilled ways to do it so that you don't end up in this situation. But you know, we spend a lot of time setting these meetings up with all these great intentions, but sometimes we're still off the mark a little bit. But honestly, there is a way to get there and really think about what do you bring to the table in terms of like the assets and the elements that you bring in. And what can you offer to the institution? Because if you do it right, you can get out of there with quite a bit of a partnership that's going to bring value for both of the members. And that's what I see. You know, we said 44 colleges out of 50 are on board. And I would say not with a lot of effort on our part. I mean, we've done a lot of work on this, but that's a bigger number than I ever thought I'd get to too. But I think it makes a lot of sense, and we're meeting a lot of objectives that we see our colleges really being faced with. So the driving factors, as I mentioned, for colleges are kind of things that are out there from the very beginning. If you look in the Texas Legislative Code, in community colleges, the adult basic education piece is part of the mission of colleges. It's something they need to be doing and should be doing per the mission statement of community colleges in Texas. 60 by 30 is all about completions and about speeding completions and getting goals and marketable skills and alignments. And those are things that we're doing in adult education. We can bring value and expertise for that lower skilled population especially. House Bill 2223 with the co-requisites is obsessing the minds of everybody in colleges right now in terms of getting to those percentages at their colleges to fully deploy those co-requisite models. And so there's a basic ed piece in there and a contextualization piece. The new 2019 Developmental Education Plan requires colleges to integrate with adult education programs in their communities. So it's a good idea, it's a must, but it's really just making sense when you get down to it and you start to look at the assets that we have at adult ed that colleges are driving at. And I'll end by thinking about what those assets are. Well, they're money. We got a lot of money out there in your communities. And that's often when, you don't know how many times I've talked to college presidents and they don't know that at their own institutions, they have $1 million of adult ed money, and they're not putting it to work. They don't know there's a partner that's in their community that has $1 million or $500,000 or $2 million or $3 million that could be leveraged to help the college with its mission. So we still have an awareness gap in a pretty big way, and that's why I'm so thrilled, and it warms my heart to work with Cynthia Farrell and the Texas Pathways Project, because she's got access to that group. And we've been working together to kind of bridge that discussion, but bring that awareness to what we're doing. We've got students, and we got students that have made a decision and said, well, I'm not here to find myself. I'm here because I need a job and I want to get somewhere. Help me along my road quickly. So we've got 80,000 students that are an asset to the colleges in terms of pipelines. And we've got students in the colleges in the state that are struggling with enrollments. And I'm like, we're busting with enrollments. We can share those students and co-enroll those students into colleges. And then we've got our rigor through our standards. We've got contextualized content. And then the other thing we have is a cohort of maniacal and dedicated career navigators out there. These are staff members in our programs that are really the guides on the sides, the vision forward, the encouragers that help students stay engaged, stay informed, do your FAFSA, enroll in college. Did you get a job? Are you keeping the job? Why are you quitting the job? And they're working on behalf of the student. Kind of like an advisor, but a lot different. Kind of like a case manager in a workforce center, but a lot different. It's a hybrid. And that growth of those career navigators, we've got several hundred of them in the state now. There's so many, we have to have a conference for them now. But they're awesome. But those of you that know one or might be one, you know what the value assets they bring to student success and keeping students engaged. But that's a value we bring to the college. And I know up in Dallas, they have a great network of aligning those career navigators to their academic advisors, and that's where we see the real value that we're bringing in terms of staff. So I'll end by talking about credit and non-credit. One of our big pushes right now is we got a lot of non-credit programs in adult education with our workforce training. We want to start moving more into the credit world, and that's where this ability to benefit conversation comes from. So we've been moving from finding the win-win. Oh, this is awesome. Where'd the arrow go? There was an arrow that goes up. Imagine that. Put your secret glasses on and you can see it. But it's really moving into the trajectory into credit and ability to benefit. And I just did some surveying last week. Some of y'all got this survey 2 weeks ago, I guess, on ability to benefit, and was very surprised that out of 36 colleges that responded, we had 9 of them saying, was it 9, Ann? I don't have the numbers up here. 9 are doing ability to benefit. Of course, some aren't. And then there's quite a few colleges that didn't know what it was. So we have an awareness gap on ability to benefit. Not surprising. At the national level, at that meeting I was at last week, that was one of the biggest things that the Department of Education was saying. And these were the financial aid people. You don't get them out of their offices much. And they were saying, hey, people don't even use this program. They don't know what it is. We get questions about it. And they were even saying, they have staff that didn't know at the Department of Ed that it had changed because ability to benefit had been around until 2012, and it got rescinded and came back, and it rebirthed and all. But there's some awareness piece that has to happen. And then in terms of the way folks are doing it, if you know anything, who's doing ability to benefit in here at your college right now? Raise your hand. Oh, good. We got quite a few over here. Okay. There's ways you can qualify students. So remember I said these are students with no high school diploma, but they're going to get a Pell Grant. But you have to prove they have some ability to benefit from Pell Grants and from college. So there's really two major ways to do that. One, they can take a test and get a certain score. And it's not the TSIA test. It's the AccuPlacer test and some other tests. So that one's marginally, and I think I have the number up here, there. So the test, we've got several institutions that are doing the test. Many of them are doing either 6 hours, and so the student has to take 6 hours of credit and pass, and then they can qualify for financial aid. And that's where most people are doing it, because I believe, and probably y'all do too, I've never met, and I said this to this national audience last week, but I have never met a student that would rather take a test than take a class. And so by taking the class, they seem to really be able to be excited and get engaged, and then they can show their ability to benefit and get that financial aid. And then some colleges in Texas are doing both options there. So we got a long way to grow. 9 colleges is not a lot out of the 36 that responded, but this is a growth area for us, and I think a lot of it's bringing awareness to it. And I was pretty blunt with the audience last week in saying, y'all are just doing a terrible job of promoting this from the Department of Education. They release it in all these kind of financial aid letters that are very hard to read and not very attractive, and probably only the financial aid department people in your colleges ever read it or get it. So I'm like, you should be surprised that you can't get ability to benefit to grow. Look at how you promote it. It's just poorly promoted. The assistant secretary I saw took some notes when I said that. So maybe you'll see some bigger push on ability to benefit. But that's really what I got there. There's a picture there. There it is. The pictures just show up magically. This is awesome. But yes, we have a lot of building to do, a lot of growing together, and that's what we want to do today, is start the discussion if it hasn't started. But in this room, I think we've got a lot of folks that are ready to go kind of from good to great in those discussions and come back and go to your institutions next week with some new ideas and new partners maybe perhaps.